Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I apologize if my mic was unmuted earlier. That was completely unintentional and likely a mistake on my part in OBS. So I've got homework to go through and do. So last week's stream, we worked on a little program called Rentopoly, which was a simple application. I love board games. I love programming. And so naturally, I write software for board gaming because that was fun for me. More importantly, board games are meant to be played, and I often loan my games out to friends to let them go and do it. And I have a very short-term memory. Maybe I haven't had enough Mountain Dew that day and can't remember. So this was going to be a very simple kind of checkout style application for me to keep track of just who have I loaned what to. That was the idea. With sort of a side goal of it being more of a full-fledged, simpler application when people ask me, hey, I'm trying to build a WPF app. I want to bring in entity framework, database, that kind of thing. Can you point me to any reasonable examples? It's kind of hoping for this to be a bit of an example. So we're writing some stuff just for the kicks and giggles of having good example code in there. Apparently my stream was so good that I had a friend and colleague decide that he wanted to come and join in. As he described himself, he is a recovering Python developer, but he does know C# despite what he will tell you. So Joe, welcome aboard. Oh, hang on. Okay, start again. This time with your mic unmuted.
Oh, am I good now?
You're good now. I unfortunately had clicked too many buttons and muted you.
Yeah. I was just saying I like the recovering Python tag, though I'm not sure I'll use that at the Python group.
Yeah, that's probably not going to be great.
Yeah.
So Joe runs the Spokane Python user group. Link in the chat. If anybody is in the area, you guys stream some of those too, don't you? Yes?
Yeah, we try and live stream all of them. Last week or last month we didn't, but that's just because it was like sort of a different format. But usually when it's just a normal presentation, we'll live stream it.
Cool. So, and I know they've done a lot of different cool things, so feel free to check out the website. They've got the previous meetups if people are interested in kind of what type of stuff they do. These can kind of range quite a bit. Python developers like to dabble in lots of different areas. At least that's my intended. Like they just import a package and poof, okay, today we're doing AI, or poof, now we're doing computer vision, or it's like, let's bring something in and build a website or whatever. So
it's really like the Python, Linux, embedded AI user group.
Awesome.
Etc.
Cool. So, and Justin Beaver says hello to you. I'll wave.
Oh, Justin.
He is we'll call it a regular. So, last time on Rentopoly, I hadn't updated my README, and a very kind YouTube viewer pointed out that I didn't bother to write a description anywhere, so I figured let's write a description. So tonight's stream is going to end up on the README under part 2. Because last time we got most of the way through a lot of stuff, but we didn't get all the way there. We got a little distracted. I may have gotten hung up on making an arrow go round and round and spin on refresh because that was cool. So let's fire this thing up and then we'll decide where we want to go first. Joe, you get to, as the guest of honor, you get to decide what you think would be interesting to do. So
Lovely.
So we built this thing out. We've artificially slowed down the load just for the purpose of so we could see the loading spinner go. And I don't know if you caught it. In this little corner, the little thing spins. We made the little icon spin. It's so cool.
I ran it locally and I was like, wait, it's using SQLite. Why is it loading? Like, why does anything need to load?
It's because unfortunately when you're trying to do oh, hang on, we didn't delete that one. Let's see, view rentals. It's this task delay right here. It turns out that SQLite was a little too fast and we were loading all the data more or less instantaneously. And well, you don't get to see your loading spinner if you do that. So we have artificially decided that we're going to slow it down for kicks and giggles, or we're going to make our database so big that it actually takes 2 seconds. One of the two. I don't know which. So, but we got the simple app. We can create a new rental. Like I can say, I'm going to loan to Joe, save. We can go back over to my views, and I can see that I loaned something out to you, and on the date, and then I can mark it if it's returned or not. You'll note here, so lots of things we haven't implemented yet. One, we have not implemented the game catalog, which, you know, that might be a useful thing to have at some point. We have not implemented actually showing the list of games here because, frankly, we don't have the game catalog implemented, so there was nothing to link to. And unlike the new rental, once again, we probably need to pull that in. There's other kind of UI things, like we're lacking a cool icon up here, which could be, I mean, that's all of 2 minutes to go and add, but that could be fun. And then I think we started down the idea of building out some tests, but we haven't done a ton of it. And by haven't done a ton of it, I mean we've done exactly one. Which is not
test coverage right there.
which is not a lot. But at least
test loaner.
Yeah, but it does go through and call out kind of how this is expected to be set up, so we can start adding more stuff to it. I'm kind of thinking real quick, this main window view model, we kind of killed off its intent. Yeah, so we're just going to burn it to the ground. That's just, it's no longer useful. We don't need it. Die. Okay, so what do you think would be fun to do? What should we do first?
I think being able to add a game would be really useful because that's the first thing I tried to do when I ran it.
How dare you? How dare you use the opening screen?
Also, a side note, have you seen Josh Ward's game website before?
Yes, I have. And
okay.
I'm jealous of it. At some point, I have high hopes of doing like Blazor hybrid inside of here to be able to go through and like have the web front end for like viewing, and then this is like the back end. We'll call that V5. But yes, I have high hopes of getting there at some point because we may eventually migrate off of SQLite into like real SQL and that kind of thing, and throw something in Azure and all that kind of fun jazz.
SQLite's real. It's super real. What's
It's real as long as you like local.
Have you seen Fly.io? They have like they acquired a tool that's to like back up your SQLite and give you versioning. Fly.io.
Fly.io.
It's what everyone went to when Heroku got rid of its free tier.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, I don't think if you look at their articles, they don't have anything on C#. I think they just assume that everyone's probably using Azure for that.
Got it. Note to self, putting this on my cool.
Yeah, I think adding the game would be sweet. Maybe a cool dashboard of the games you have.
Okay. Well, that might be a long list, and I'm probably not going to remember them all from memory. I might have to walk downstairs and actually figure out what they are. Okay, so do you want to start from the top where we do like the UI first and work down to it? Do you want to start from the bottom with like a view model and work up? Or like test-driven design and start with the test and go backwards?
Let's start from the bottom.
So view model.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I'm going to propose then that we need a new namespace, maybe something called games, right? And let's call this, I don't know, catalog view model.
So is this typically how you, and I think you mentioned this in your last stream, you sort of categorize your vertical business logic slices into these folders?
Sorry. Wow. Okay, how do you spell catalog? Let's start with that. I realize Katelog is probably wrong.
That looks good.
Hang on.
Catalog. I thought it was two
Hold
A's.
on. Copilot. How do you spell catalog? I have found AI is worthless. The correct spelling of catalog is with a C.
That's great.
Copilot! Let's just say Copilot's not the most useful. Oh, that's close. I just needed to not be Kate. Catalog. So,
I haven't seen that chat before. That's neat. I've only seen like the auto suggestions.
oh, catalog. Oh, hang on. I see a GUE. Oh, hang on. Is this going to be one of those? Oh, now I have to look up the grammatical difference between GUE. Okay. So, are we going to go with American English or everywhere else?
I'd say America.
Okay. Okay. So yes, this is GitHub chat. It was, I don't know if it's out of private beta yet. I have had, we will say, low expectations for it. It has, the few times I've used it, it has been that level of, it starts with a C. That's the level of help I've received from it, and no, it's been actively harmful over everything. No, but to answer your question, yeah, I do tend to like, and I've waffled on this over the years. So depending, if you look at like code I've written in the past, you will see that I'm very like, it's not been consistent. However, current mentality, Kevin, thinks that separating things by logical function generally seems to produce better results.
Makes sense.
That's been, and again, people will have different opinions. Okay, but we are going to be source generating all the things, partial class, observable object, observe. Wow. I'm really glad I'm not paid for my typing or spelling ability, because, oh boy, I'd be out of a job. Okay.
I saw you had a previous talk on this. I think it was on that toolkit or the MVVM.
Yes.
It was one of your more recent ones. I have not watched the talk, but I saw it was there. And I think you referenced it.
Yeah, the one that I did on the 8.0 release of the community toolkit is by far, it may be my top performing video at this point. Wow. It kind of caught on by wildfire, and people shared it in a couple of popular forums, and so it picked up a lot of views. But it is, for anybody doing MVVM, which I think you've got some experience with like MVC style frameworks a little bit.
Yeah, I did. So the one C# project I did before I started doing Python in the corner was like .NET, ASP.NET Core 3.1, I think, with an Angular front end.
Got it. Okay.
And then that's the only professional project I worked on other than like stuff in classes. Yeah.
So MVVM and MVC are fairly similar. The big difference between them is in a model view controller idea. The view may actually like know something and do that communication. Whereas in an MVVM, the view model should really be, or I guess I said that backwards. The controller knows something about the view and is oftentimes, pushing things or controlling things or switching things up on it. Whereas in an MVVM style, the view model should be pretty agnostic about the view and not know anything about it. The view model exposes the data and relies on the presence of some sort of like binding engine for that communication to go back and forth. The view knows about the view model, but not the other way around. And it lets you then kind of re-template things in a lot of different ways, where you may swap out that view to do or look differently in different areas. Which is both a benefit and where the criticism comes of people going, that's too complicated, we never do that, yada yada yada. It's like, but in WPF land, we were given a first class awesome binding engine, and so we abuse it. Okay, so I think one of the things we're going to need is a collection of games, right? I think is what we want, right? So we'll say game view model.
For our catalog.
For our catalog, because I think we're gonna want to see the result of it. So let's do public partial class game view model.
Now, are these partial because of what you are inheriting from?
No, so they're partial for the source generators. So the MVVM toolkit leverages the later C# source generators to be able to generate out multiple things. So for example, normally you end up having to build out like I'm trying to think of a good example. I'll just pick on this one down here, right? So if I convert to full property. So if you were to do a full property thing in here, in order for the view to know that a property is changed, this base class implements an interface called iNotifyPropertyChange. So people often get really confused as to how the whole binding engine works. It's not magical at all. This event gets raised when Visual Studio is done crashing. The event args has a property name, and the binding engine is just looking for that property name. Oh yeah, Visual Studio crashed all the way down. Excellent. Yeah, let's go ahead and recover that, please.
Okay, that makes sense. I think you talked about that a little bit in the first part of your last talk, right?
Yep. And the big limitation is we don't like writing all of that code, so we just don't. And
Gotcha.
And so that's what the source generators end up generating for us behind the scenes, is all of the boilerplate needed for that. So we'll pull that in here in a moment. Name, description. I don't like the min-max players. I'm probably going to use it though, so I might do it. Oh, live share is actually what crashed it. That's exciting. I can kick that thing back up again. All right.
If it crashes it again, it's okay. I can watch.
Well, yes, but it would be cooler to have it not suck. Okay, so link to you, and there it goes. I do like how it doesn't like just blindly expose the link to everybody on screen, which is great. As exciting as it would be to all of a sudden have a bunch of visitors coming in and editing the code, that would be less than thrilling. Okay, and then we need to decide really quick on the idea of how do we want to actually do the ad. So, couple choices. We could do kind of a dialogue pop. What is your problem? Non-nullable. Oh, yeah, we don't need that anymore. It's like, yeah, I know there's nullability warnings. Ignore them. We aren't using that class yet. We could either do like a dialogue pop and like, maybe have an add button that pops a dialogue here that you fill out, or we could do something kind of in line where you just bring them in. Thoughts, preferences?
I kind of hate dialogues or like modals, at least in like web stuff. I find that you'll have like a full screen modal with 20 different fields, and then you accidentally click off and you lose everything. So the more web stuff I do, the less modals I reach for. So this isn't web, but let's go inline.
Inline, okay. So we're gonna have this view model then kind of drive all of the stuff, right? So let's have a public game view model. We'll call it new game. And actually, we're gonna do this. And we'll make you nullable. And we want to bind to you. So observable property, poof, source generator, all the things. I win. Okay. And let's go down here and go do that maneuver. Do that maneuver. No, that's not how you spell new. Okay, you be fine. And then we're going to do the binding operations. Enable collection synchronization, games. So I had mentioned this on my last stream, is that this is how we tell the WPF binding engine that we're going to update this from multiple threads, and to please lock. This is technically new object. It's just not obvious. But to lock on this object instance before doing any mutations to the collection, that way we don't have a cross-threading problem. So this will just say, here's an object to lock on. Please do the needed locking. Make it all work. The really unfortunate thing, you must call this from the UI thread or it will fail silently, which is just, and fail silently is the wrong words, but it won't work the way you want and your world will end and no one will be happy and they'll be crying and that kind of thing. So we won't do that.
So this lock object is just an arbitrary object.
It's really just a single instance of to pass in. And I generally will just new up a new object and feed something in. I'm a little disappointed that there isn't an overload that just doesn't take an object and just news one up for you. That would have made me much happier, but that's apparently not a thing. So I've seen projects where people have written various extensions to be able to go through and do it. Okay, and then we register up our DI thing so that our DI container knows that, hey, we want to do this catalog view model. And then the last thing we're going to do is we are going to plug that thing in on our UI itself. So we've got all of these tabs, and all of these tabs that we've put in here already have these views slapped into them, where we've kind of built out like this add rental view user control. So I think we'll just go through and do the same thing of in games, we'll do like a catalog view and keep it simple.
Do you typically, are you writing your XAML from scratch, or are you using like a UI builder tool?
That is a wonderful question. So Visual Studio has a UI designer. It's a nice WYSIWYG designer that you can, boy, I don't even know where, there's the toolbox. As you can tell, I use the toolbox very often, like never. And I don't know why it's thinking. It's initializing.
Because you've never opened it.
Yeah, so there are people who enjoy being able to come in here and grab a button and say, okay, I'm going to drag a button into here. Great. I'm going to put the button here. I'm going to pull in the various, you can see I use the material design library because it is awesome and wonderful. And you can see the various things that it affords you, and then the common WPF controls. The problem I have is that most of the time it's quicker for me to edit by hand than to use this designer. The other drawback is when you position things, it positions them by hard coding your horizontal and vertical alignment and then setting an absolute position with margin, which is potentially the worst possible way to position a control you can come up with. And I hate it rough. Very much. So I don't do that hardly at all.
Gotcha. Okay.
But in here, we are going to need to do something, right? So let's do something along the lines of trying to think of how we want to display our games. I'm thinking we have our entry field at the top and the list of games below it. Or do we want the games up top and maybe an add field that expands up when we want to add something? We could do a flyout on the side. That could be fun.
Ooh, like a flyout from the right.
Yeah.
I like that.
You like that idea? Okay, so let's do that. So we call that not a dock panel, a drawer host. Which,
not a hamburger.
well, sort of. We can, depends on how we want to open it. Like we've got, so the drawer host is something from the material design project, but it gives you that fly-outy effect from any side that you want. So we'll do the inside content around it first. I usually like my grids, and then inside the grid, let's do, actually, do we want a grid? No, let's just do a scroll viewer.
Is grid comparable to like CSS grids?
Yes, except for they don't suck.
Okay.
Sorry, was that my out loud voice? Also,
let me ask you this. Do you prefer writing UIs in XAML or in like HTML and CSS?
My preference is XAML, but that's more of a bias of experience rather than a saying that it's better. Like CSS and styling in HTML is a lot more powerful. Like there's a lot you can do. XAML is incredibly verbose. And I usually tell people there's a steep learning curve and it's worth it.
Gotcha. Okay.
One of our newest colleagues who just came onto a WPF project with me, he just told me a couple days ago, he's like, you were right. It is a really steep learning curve. It's like, I rest my case. But yeah, so I prefer it, but that's more of a thing of I'm very familiar with it, and so I'm fairly confident in what I'm going to do with it. So we're going to do an items control. And then, we'll come back and we'll come back and add a, so let's do.
So is everything that's not prefixed with material design just baked in or part of the like standard library of controls?
Yes, and actually this is one of the nice things. Okay, we're gonna get rid of the toolbox. It's annoying. This is one of the things that I actually like about XAML. It's so even though it's verbose, once you understand the syntax, it's incredibly easy to read, in my opinion. So C# has using statements at the top to tell you kind of what namespaces and things that you're bringing into reference. XAML has the same thing, but they're these XML namespaces. And with XML, every type is always namespace, type name. And so every namespace or using statement that you bring in, you have to give a name to it, except for whatever one you bring in without a prefix. So all of like the scroll viewer, items control, these ones happen to live inside of this namespace. So that's
Gotcha.
that's the magical incantation. So it's, yes, it's baked in, but the only reason these things are in the default namespace is because the default file template defaults it that way. If we were doing
Gotcha.
something that was purely material design, there's nothing actually stopping us from making this the default namespace. And then you can see then this freaks out and goes, I don't know what you're doing. So
Is the X:class, is that for styling stuff, line 2? Or is that just sort of a unique identifier?
So this is actually down. So let's order it like this. So this is actually coming from this namespace here. So once again, a common built-in namespace. The X namespace is a lot of, it's almost like built-in stuff that's kind of extension-y a little bit. So
okay.
for example, the most common one that you'll see down on these guys is like X:name. And what this actually ends up doing is in your code behind file, if you give something a name, food, then here I can do this.food. And it now shows up. Whereas the rest of my elements are pretty much just unnamed. And all that X: is doing, this X:class is saying, hey, the code behind file for this bit of XAML lives here. That's it.
Okay.
It's no more magical than that. It's literally just mapping to it. You can do, there's a thing called a resource dictionary, and oftentimes people don't realize resource dictionaries can have code behinds as well if you specify an X class on it. Do you need that? Almost never. But can you do it? Yes. That's the
Okay, well, to round out, I think I understand the height and width. What's that MC ignorable?
So this one down here is saying for the designer, ignore the following namespace stuff. So D is always pointed at this expression blend, which is an old product, technically still around, where Microsoft had this grandeur idea that UI developers would edit all of the XAML in this thing called expression blend, and then developers would write the code, and then everybody could work in harmony. That hasn't really panned out.
So do you have to still include it, or is that like the default?
It's the default. You don't have to include it, but the one thing that we want it for is this. So because expression blend is so tightly built in, it allows you to do designer time thingies. So for example, you'll note that this control currently is showing up as 450 high and 800 wide. And it's only doing that because of these design ones. The other thing we can do is something like, say we have a button, right? And we do content Joe, right? So I now have a button. I'm just going to make this go away. That has a content of Joe. But if I do D:Joe, it looks the same here, but at runtime, the content won't be set. So you can use it to set up design time only data, and you can apply it to any property you want. You can say, okay, in design time, I want, D vertical alignment top. Now, should you do this? No, it's going to confuse the living daylights out of you. Can you do it? Yes. It's really common for setting up like text blocks and that sort of thing, so that you can kind of pre-can some data and get a feel of, okay, here's the wrapping, does that look right, and that kind of thing. So, and sometimes it's useful to be able to say, especially if you have a dynamically sized thing, to just like say, okay, for the designer purposes, show me what this looks like at 40 high, etc.
Okay. So that design height and width isn't actually controlling it at runtime.
Correct. It's designer
Okay.
only. The other big thing that we get inside of here is we want catalog view model. So we can also set this data context down here. And the key thing with the data context is this drives the source for our bindings. So I'm going to get rid of our foo here real quick. So for example, when I say my item source, when I go binding space, I now actually have visibility into the properties on my view model. So I can go, oh, okay, I want to bind to my games property. So by telling it what the view model will be at runtime, I now get nice IntelliSense inside my XAML. So even if you don't use the designer, I oftentimes will at bare minimum be setting this much on it just for the IntelliSense. Otherwise, the IntelliSense has nothing to work with and it's just confused. And no one likes that.
Okay. That makes sense.
Okay, so we did that, we did that, we did that. Let's make sure we plug in this guy. Your data context no longer exists, so go away. Okay, so this is our, nope, this is our second tab. Put a space there. White space is important. And then this has a text block. So you'll note this has a text blocks of dtext to do. But yeah, when we launched the app, there was no text there. So that no working. So let's do games, game catalog view. Oh, you are. Mwah. Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah, I know it's an error in the style. Stop freaking out and do what I tell you. Nope. Nope. I understand. I understand. Invalid XAML. Invalid XAML. There we go. Yeah.
Does it auto format for you?
So
And imports and stuff?
on mine, yes. Normal people, no. So I am running an extension called XAML styler. That's what it is. And it goes through and does it.
And that just is just like on save or something?
Yeah, I have it set up somewhat aggressively. But yes, extensions, manage extensions. The other nice thing about XAML styler is you can actually check in a config file similar to your editor config into a repo, and then everybody who has the extension picks up the same settings. That's the preferred way to do it.
Aggressive code formatters prevent like dumb style wars.
Yes. Mini4G, welcome. We're continuing on from last week. Okay, so I want to figure out why we aren't compiling. Main window view model doesn't exist. So it turns out if you have tests that target main window view model and then you delete it, the tests are meaningless. So let's try this again. Let's see, catalog game view does not exist. Oh, that's because it's not catalog game view. Catalog view. Oh, and in case you were worried, Joe, this is Mountain Dew. It's just in a Hello World goblet that I painted many years ago.
What's it say? I can't. Let me.
Oh well, here I'll back up. This is ye olde thing. So it's public static void main, and then system console right line hello world.
I love it.
I would show you the air icon that's in the bottom, but it would dump all my Mountain Dew out, and that would be bad.
Yeah, not worth it.
You can guess how old it is based on the syntax, the highlighting colors I chose, and the Visual Studio icon that I clearly did not know how to draw.
Is it orange?
It's been a few years. Okay, so we're at least back to working and launching. We aren't doing anything useful. And then one other thing, so I'll point this out too. There is a wonderful app for WPF developers called Snoop. Visual Studio does have some built-in support. They call it their live visual tree. But for example, I can now control click in and I can see that I'm all the way inside of my game catalog view. I don't know if you can catch this. It's kind of hard to see. Zoom it's not stop. Zoom it's not right. Turn on zoom it. There's an itty bitty little red borderline around the outside edge. showing my game catalog view. So I can see my views loaded up. I can look at my data context, and my data context is not set, so I know I'm an idiot and didn't set it. So we're going to go back and fix it.
So it's like dev tools for WPF.
Correct. The Visual Studio ones exist.
Say Snooper
Snoop.
WPF or Snoop.
Yeah, and if you search for it, you want to do Snoop WPF, because if you just search Snoop, you end up with things like Snoopy and Snoop Dogg, neither of which will help you with your WPF. In case you were considering using, I mean, I guess you could try.
You never know. Peter Blois, he is the creator.
Peter Blois? What?
Or
Bastian Smith?
is the current maintainer.
Ah, okay. Carry forth then. Okay, so data context, DI, all the things, we're good. Okay. Okay, so we got this thing built up. We are going to do some sort of pop in and out thingy mabobber. What do you want the trigger to be to open up the flyout? Should we slap a button on, or what are we doing?
Wait, can you run the app?
Yes. It's going to be very boring, though. So I go here. I got nothing.
What about like a little button in the top right?
Little button in the top
Maybe
right.
like an arrow pointing left, just begging to be opened.
Begging to be opened. Okay, so let's do something like a grid. And we're going to do a grid with a couple rows. And you'll note I haven't stopped my debugger yet because I'm going fast and loose.
Do you get hot reloading?
Yes,
Okay,
you do. Cool. Well, let me rephrase. You get it when it works. And when your formatter actually has it. And so this scroll viewer is going to go in grid row 1, and then we're going to do a button. Let's see, the content, we're going to do a pack icon, kind, I don't know, arrow left. That sounds great to me.
So you define your grid at the top, but you're not actually nesting stuff within your rows.
Correct.
By like nesting the XML, the XAML elements.
Correct. So in this case, and I don't technically need to do this because the default value of an int is 0, but we set them up with attached properties. So as long as, or I should say, typically an attached property will not have any behavior on its own. I put a little star next to that because some people very much implement things like behaviors with attached properties. It's weird. It can be done. Should be done sparingly. Generally, attached properties don't have any behavior on their own. And so this grid row property here only has meaning if it's inside of a grid, right? If I go and slap this same grid row up on my dialog host, this is meaningless. It's not inside of a grid. Like, does it do anything? No. Is it hurt anything? I mean, it causes confusion, but... And like I said, technically row doesn't matter. So now we can look, we got a button. Oh, that's spanning the whole thing. Oh, hang on. Let's do one more thing real quick. One other thing. If we do topmost true, now it'll sit on top of Visual Studio while I edit.
Oh, nice.
And then we'll just put you up here. And so we'll do something like horizontal alignment right. Generally, I do this on multiple monitors, but it's really hard to stream and show that. Like usually I'll just set the app on monitor 2 and then... And so now we got a button, and we want to open up the thingy mabobber. So
that is a lovely button. I want to click it.
I agree. And so we can actually pop the thing open without doing any work. Well, and by doing no work, what I clearly mean is doing a little bit of work. Let's see there. Your host. What is it? Open drawer command, and I want to pass it a parameter. Let's see. And I want it to be, do I have to do an X? I can't remember if I have to do an X static here, if I can get away with just specifying it. Doc, right. So if I do this, whoop, Okay, well, we should probably put. Hang on, let's put something in the host so that we can actually see. Hold on, Copilot, were you gonna be awesome? Come on, Copilot. Ooh! Tell me
that's
that.
pretty good.
Copilot, you win for the night. Oh, Copilot, you are on point. Okay. That didn't do what I expected. And I'm not sure if that's a hot reload problem. So we're just going to relaunch because I think that's correct.
Would that be right drawer content if we're opening it from the right?
Oh, you know what? We should probably put it on the right. So
is that x:static? Is that just basically saying I'm just hard coding the value here and not like it's not in my C#?
it is more akin to the static keyword in C#. It's I want to reference a static member of something directly. And sometimes static member will be like enum value, for example. Like in this case, this write doc is an enum and write is just a value on it.
Okay, that makes sense.
So now we have whoop, whoop, whoop,
Nice.
whoop. Yeah. So as long as you both put the content in the right drawer that you're talking about, and then you open that drawer, it works. The other thing that's really cool here that I'll point out for people is we bound this up without actually doing a ton of work because of the way this command property works. So this is what's called a routed command in WPF, and this is one of its cool features. Is when this command executes, routed commands walk up your XAML tree looking for somebody to handle them. And so because this is inside of a drawer host, when this thing walks up, when it gets up to the drawer host goes, hey, I know how to handle that command. And it goes, great. Doc write, please. And it goes, yep. And opens the right doc for us. So because this is inside of the drawer host, we only have to do this. If we wanted to do this and the drawer host wasn't in our direct parent, there is another parameter called command target that you can specify, and you basically then just have to target the drawer host or something inside of the drawer host, because the command target by default is yourself, but you can make the command target someone else if you need to like walk up a different tree. So, which is just awesome and amazing. And so
would the best practice there be to use command and command parameter, that stuff, if it's all like static data that you can't, like basically if you can do it in using those, then to use them, otherwise use like.
If you can do things with commands, they're generally better. Oftentimes, and we'll get to this in a minute, you're going to use commands that forward to methods in your view model, because most of the time when a command gets executed, you probably want to do something. In this case, it's really just UI type stuff that we're doing. So not having it hit the view model is no big deal, right? We just basically want to say, yeah, go on in. And maybe at some point we're going to change that and say, well, we'll do something different. But for now, this much works. So let's put something in here. And I think we're going to make this guy have a bigger width to start with. Or how about a min width of 300? Yeah, something like that, maybe.
So that's like a int, which is pixels. Can you do things like percentages or other types of?
So it's not actually pixels. WPF does device independent pixels, which means this is 300 if your DPI on your monitor is set to 100%. So if you have like a high DPI screen, it's going to get multiplied around for you by the according percentage. But you are correct. You, in terms of doing percentages, you can't just arbitrarily slap in like a 50% here. That's not a valid value. There are certain controls that allow it though, and this is one of the things that I like about grids. Because grids, you'll note I set the height to auto here. Heights on things like grids, and let's close this so you can see it. This I could set to do star sizing, which is effectively percentages. So the default behavior of each of the rows is 1 star. So one piece of the pie, which in this case is going to mean 50%. unless we add a third row, and then it means 33%.
Gotcha.
So you can do
kind of like flex.
yeah, very similar. The other thing you have is auto, and then you also have fixed value. So if I say 100, it's going to be 100 no matter what. And you can kind of see it. It's really hard to view, but the thing is sitting on top. The little scroll bars here. So you can kind of tell that one got moved down. Because I know the default is 1 star for everything, I oftentimes will just omit it completely. Because this, in my opinion, reads fairly cleanly, that the first one has a height that is going to shrink to its content, and the other one's just going to fill the remaining space.
So if you use like a few rows with like 1 star, and then you had auto, like auto's has the least priority.
Auto has highest priority, but it only allocates as much space as it needs to contain its children. So for example, if the button itself decided it wanted a height of 300, the auto column gets that 300, and then the star sizing gets the lowest priority evaluation. I think it's actually fixed dimension is highest, then auto, then star sizing.
Okay.
I can't remember. It's rare that you have all 3 in the same grid, though.
Yeah.
I rarely push it, and there's kind of there are sort of things like that. The real scary thing here is if you wanted to make this min width here be a percentage. The other thing we can do is we can like bind it to the width of the drawer host and do like a value converter to say, well, take the value that's coming in and divide by 2 or something. So you can get yourself to percentage sizing if you want. It's just not something that you get by like typing 50%. And this is somewhat of an artifact of the fact that WPF is the best technology 2005 has to offer.
I love it.
I'm only partly joking. Okay, so let's do a little bit here. So usually I like a little bit of margin around my stuff to give it a little bit of height. How about we do new game to start, and then I have the material design demo app around just because I feel like I might want it. Where's typography? Boom. Let's see. We might do. What do you think? Like a heading 6, maybe? Maybe that.
Yeah, that looks good.
Something.
Or 1. 1 looks good too.
This one?
Half the size of our window.
Details. So we're just gonna copy that little line out, come over here and go whoop. Then we're gonna put a space in. Boom. Okay, so we got a little styling going there. That looks nicer. Okay, and so down below this, so a stack panel, the other thing to know about is it is only going to it's going to compress everything to fit its contents. And by default, stack panels are vertical, but you can flip them horizontal if you need to. So let's see. We need probably a text box for the name, right? Text box, text, binding name. And I really want this thing to be bound to I kind of want this thing to have a different data context than the catalog. I kind of feel like the contents inside of this flyout really need to be our, move you down here, our game view model, because that's kind of what we're going to be building up. So now if I do binding, I should see things like our name property. Great, wonderful. And then I would like it styled a little less ugly. So we come over here and we build fields, and I go, which one of these looks prettiest? Do you like the outline, the filled one?
Didn't they? There was one of them. They got rid of just the naked single underline.
I mean, I still have it.
Oh, well, it's like not part of the most recent material spec, right?
Yeah, if you
people
look at
were confused by it.
The Material Design 3 one, yeah.
I like filled fields.
Excellent. We will do that then. Let's see here. So we want this guy. And we're going to go, whoop. What is your problem? Error at root level design 1. I don't know what your problem is. Root level.
So does an element just use the closest data context to it?
It will use,
like looking upwards from itself?
yes, or more accurately, the data context flows down. So it doesn't necessarily look up, but one set at a root level will propagate down. And this D data context doesn't exist doesn't actually set the data context. The fact that I've set this here is a bold-faced lie. What did I...
That just gives you... Oh, that was just the designer thing to give you the...
Correct. And I'm trying to figure out why it's unhappy. Error and data at root... Oh, it's because I've typed a 0 at the top, and that is invalid XML. Okay. So when it was saying line 1, what it meant is, you moron, look at line 1. Got it. Okay.
I'd blame Copilot. They probably did it.
I wish I could. I'm going to blame this extra Joe person who's got editor permissions.
Oh, is that? Oh, that probably was me. I'm leaning on my keyboard.
I mean, it's possible. Okay, so we've got that. Let's grab, because we can do this kind of hint thing too. Let's give it a little, let's slap a hint on there as well. Just so that it looks, a little prettier. Name. And apparently that doesn't work with hot reload, so that's exciting. So I'm just going to click the button real quick. This is one of the things, like, I prefer doing the hot reload approach because it shows what it... Well, that's interesting. Why... Oh, because I put the hint on the text block, not on the... So if you put it on the wrong thing, it doesn't show up.
Oh, look at that.
There we go.
So I've got a question for you. Is there a way to basically, instead of having to create your inputs like one at a time for all of your fields in like basically the form you're creating, can you just say like, here's my view model, look at the types and create, you know, this beautiful form for me?
This is what's great about having somebody who knows nothing of the framework. That would be a wonderful feature. That does not exist, but it actually wouldn't be that hard to build.
So in Django, I'll take it back to Python because that's what I know. In Django, there's this popular package called Crispy Forms, where you basically, it's kind of similar. Like you have a context for your whole template, which is like the equivalent of this XAML file, but HTML typically. And you can basically just pipe like a form object from your context into this, like it's crispy form function, and it just like renders all of your form for you and makes it look real nice.
Yeah, Mini4G comments, items control with data templates. That's actually exactly what I was thinking of. Is like, it would not be terribly difficult to do. It'd require a minor amount of reflection, but it's totally doable.
Next live stream.
I mean, it's not a bad idea to build out. The question being, right? Like, it would not be hard if I immediately see the complexities coming with form layout and people wanting to customize it. Like, well, I want these two fields side by side, and then these next ones on the next line. Like, how do you start allowing that type of customization? Right. That's where I see things getting weird.
And so it, like the way that Crispy Forms one works is it sort of gives you different levels of granularity, I guess, where you can like just render the whole form and it'll just give you, like you can do some like setup in your settings file to kind of do global level settings.
Yeah.
But it'll just render the whole form for you in whatever element you plop it in. Or if you, like you're saying, like want to put two elements by each other, you can like give it just a specific field in the form and just plop it to the function. It'll like render, like instead of deciding to use text box and the material design stuff, it would just like do that for you.
Yeah, I can see that being really powerful. I've contemplated going through and building out some more complex WPF controls like that. Like the other thing that I wish existed is I wish stack panel had a property to say, hey, put this much margin between each item in the stack panel. That's something that exists in some newer XAML frameworks like Maui, but it doesn't really exist. Like that's not a WPF thing. And so people have built like attached properties, and those are an example where people will put behavior to it. And I've thought about building some of those things out because the number of times I've wanted that is kind of high. And
have you heard of, or sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it. Carry on.
The lobotomized owl?
I've heard all of those words in isolation.
Well, it's just two, lobotomized and owl. It's
correct. I know what each of those words mean independently, but this feels like one of those cases that.
So it's the first link. I can almost guarantee the first link if you Google that is this article on this front end design website called The List Apart, and it's basically this like CSS thing where you do like splat plus splat, and it's like how you get like this space between your objects without actually like having to go and define it on every object. Or you could do like a div plus div, and then you would do like margin, top, whatever, and then...
I assume you're talking about this. We'll allow the cookies.
My guarantee fell flat. Sorry, no, it was not that one. But it's probably the same idea. It's the reason you do that.
How many lobotomized owls are out there?
It's like basically like if you just added margin to the top of all of like a class or an element, then your top one's going to have margin, and you probably don't want that. You just want it in between. So it's selecting only elements that are consecutive elements of the same type. Or class or whatever.
Yes. This feels like the same idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that like WPF styling engine is to some degree showing its age.
It's 2005-ness.
Correct. Like and things like Maui have added features like that to make it better because people have wanted it. But yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you.
That's the one but it's probably the same. And also, as far as the like a component that just sort of you give it a field and it figures out what to render. Doesn't Coalesce have something like that for like its view stuff?
It does. It's
like a C select or something, and it just kind of knows what to do.
Yes.
I know it's not WPF.
No, it is totally fine. I'm just going to show this off for people who want to see it. So for anybody interested in the Coalesce thing that he's talking about, there's the link. And then there's the tech S YouTube. There is top hit. Booyahs. Booyah.
You mean when you Google our name and our framework, we're at the top?
Yeah, but notice whose channel it's on.
Oh, nice.
So if anybody's interested, there was at one point in time, there was a bunch of people interested in the Coalesce framework, so I conned Grant and Andrew, arguably the creator and the person who's done the most work on it, to go through and actually build it out. And they came on and did a stream on it. The stuff on the stream is mildly dated because I think it's still back on Vue 2. But if you look at the repo, it is updated to Vue 3 for anybody who cares. Andrew very much likes to be on latest, greatest stuff and will actively update whenever given the freedom. Okay, so let's actually build. Okay, so I want to do a couple things here. One, should this thing be light dismiss?
Like click to collapse?
Yeah, click to collapse.
I mean, as long as it doesn't clear out the form.
Okay.
Like nothing worse than accidentally clicking off a form that you've typed in a ton of information on.
Right, and it's not going to clear, but because we can do there's a property we can set to turn that behavior off if we don't like it. Let's come down here, and then rather than having this guy close the drawer, this is where we actually get to do something fun, because at this point now we want to do some saving of thingies, right? And so now we run into a question of how do we want to do this? And I'm actually wondering if this data context is even the right place to do it. I'm kind of thinking it's not. So we might kill that off. And in this case, this is going to be something like new game name, right? So let's go back into our catalog view model. And I don't actually think I want this new game property anymore. I want an observable property. I want it to be a private string new game name. Boom. New property exists. Everyone's happy.
That's at a name game name in your C#.
Thank you. I'm glad to see you are living up to your role of correcting my spelling. Okay. And then we have this issue of we don't want this thing to just close the drawer. We want this thing to save to the database and then do the needful, right? So let's go ahead and make something that does that. So we do private, and it's going to be an async method. So async task. I don't know. Save game. I can't decide if that's a reasonable name or not. We'll do it. Okay, relay command. Poof. Bippity boppity booyah. We have a save game command. So now over here, we go binding, save game command. Done. And this should probably be called something more like save. And you'll note I put an underscore in front of the S. This is because Kevin likes accelerator keys. So what that means is if I type in a name here, like Joe, and then I hit Alt, you see how the S gets an underscore under it?
Oh,
I can now go
cool.
Alt S. So if you any of the content controls in WPF, if you just put an underscore in front of the name, it will give you an accelerator key there. This is the cause of much confusion online because so many people are like, why are my underscores not showing up? Well, that's why.
I assumed it was like a translation thing, like to allow for other languages.
Oh, no, that would be clever. No, it's much simpler than that. Okay, so let's actually build out saving the game. So the first thing we need is our, let's see, board game context. So, I don't know. And then let's slap it in property, add a null check, do the needful, make you private because you don't need to be exposed outside, put you at the top because I'm paranoid. And then, okay, so first thing we should do is we should probably not let somebody save if they haven't typed in a name, right?
That checks.
So private bool can save game. And then we're going to do with not string is null or white space, new game name.
So you have private string underscore new game name on line 18. And then in your XAML, I think you were referencing new game name.
Yep.
So is that observable property is what's adding that for you?
Correct. If we go and look at the analyzers from the community toolkit, we look at their source generators, or that's an analyzer. Where is their source generator? Community toolkit source generator, observable property generator, and I look at what they did to my catalog view model. This is the code that they generated. So I slap that little attribute on the field, and they generated up all of this for me.
Oh, right. Okay, that's like
so that's how I'm able to get it. So I just happen to know the convention, and it's got all these partial methods and everything. So you've got all these injection hooks if you want them.
That's really cool that you can just go look inside that folder and see that.
Yes.
It's not like hidden away from you.
Yeah.
Well, more than that folder is.
I will say this, oftentimes I run into problems if the compile is failing for some reason. These often are out of date. So I will just make that comment that don't and that can be the cause of a bit of confusion. There is an MS build property you can set on your CS proj to also dump the generated files out to your OBJ directory if you want to go look at them there as well. which if you're running into like compile issues caused by source generators is often needed. But these things, even though they look like files, they aren't real files. Like source generators don't write to disk because that would make them slower and sucky. And we are .NET devs. We don't do that kind of crap.
So I think Coalesce uses the .g.cs naming convention for its generated files, but that must be kind of a totally different thing.
So the .g.cs convention for the naming actually is something that a lot of tooling is built around inside of Visual Studio. In ye olden days with like T4 source generators and like ResX, that was the convention that like, because this is pre-source generators being a thing, when people actually like wrote code that generated source, not source generators, things that generated source, very different. They would oftentimes tack that .g.cs, and so there's a bunch of tooling that's been built up to say, oh, if I see that extension, I know that this was a generated file and not a user created file. Now, there's nothing stopping you from just making your own files with .g.cs. Just don't do it.
Makes sense.
So, for what it's worth. Okay, and then we want to do something like can execute. So, because we want this method to be invoked, name of can save game. So this can method, this is a Kevinism. I prefer to have my methods that determine if the relay command can execute to be prefixed with the word can. This is
so how often is it running that method?
Once when the command is first bound and never again, which is a problem because we would like it updated whenever this property changes. So we're going to come up here and go notify can execute change for name of save game command. Now it's being edited every time this property changes, which is also not good enough, but I'll demonstrate. Because this is one of those things like there's so much magic, and when you know the magic, it's amazing and you can do stuff quickly. And when you don't know the magic, you're just left confused and banging your head against a wall. So you'll note, button disabled, rightfully so, there's no name specified. I type in Joe, button still disabled. This is not good. I press tab, button enabled.
Oh.
So it's
waiting for you to blur the element.
In WPF, we call it lost focus, but yes, you are correct. But we can change this to, because this is expected to be a very short field, like there's not going to be paragraphs of text written. The easiest thing to do is say, you know what? I would like you to update your source on every single change. So it's now going to ping that property every time you do a keystroke press, which then triggering the property is going to re-query that command. And so now as soon as I type J, it updates.
Nice.
And so now we can do Twilight Imperium. Arguably one of the largest footprint games that I own. Okay. Let's see. So we've got that.
Let's see what this game is.
Twilight Imperium 4th edition. There's an expansion that has recently come out. My set has been partially updated to the expansion for the like 3 people who care. If you ever want to kill off a good 8 to 10 hours, let me know, because that's roughly how long a full game takes.
I like the War Sun.
Yes, the not a Death Star.
Yeah.
Okay, so we get in here. We should probably go through, and we have a game context, and we have games, right? Board games, yes. So I need a new board game object, because I want to call add here.
Is this like Catan in space?
Oh, see, if I say yes to that, people are gonna tar and feather me. So I can't say yes to that, because it is significantly more complex than that. There is space combat, there's diplomacy, there's trade, area of control. Like this game is massive.
Have you ever live streamed your board games?
No, and the gaming group that I typically play with, we've actually joked about live streaming at times, but we're also very conscious of the fact that sometimes some of the things that get said during the board game we would not want to be broadcast, because sometimes the arguments get a little heated,
Gotcha.
and that may or may not go well. I have done a grand total of, I think, 2 board game streams, and I think there were ones on Tabletop Simulator, if I remember correctly, with my buddy James. So I've contemplated it. I've really contemplated it. It's just, if we do that, I have to go into it with the idea of, okay, everybody, nobody get heated on this, like, because there's, especially in games like Twilight Imperium, there's backstabbing. There will be backstabbing. There will be people who make agreements and then promptly backstab their allies, and it's glorious. Okay, so board game, we want name gets a new game name. So we're gonna do this much here. And I'm just gonna no coalesce it so I don't have to think too hard. Get board game context, save changes. Let's do it async. Save changes async. Oh wait, we made this an async method. We might as well do the needful. Okay, so we got all that. That's built. That's wonderful. The thing's disabled. Now we have 2 problems with what we've built. So we will demonstrate the problems. Problem 1. If I type in Joe and I hit save, 1, because I've switched the command that's being executed, and actually I'll put a breakpoint here just to prove that we're actually getting in here, right? Whoop. So breakpoint, yay, breakpoint. We create, we do the needful, we save changes, everyone's happy, great. I've now inserted 2 rows into my database with the name of Joe. My flyout is no longer closed. This thing should probably clear on success. None of that interaction. We've broken all of the interaction, right?
Exactly. None of it happened.
I mean, we saved it to the database, but we're not populating the collection anywhere. Like, none of this stuff is actually like doing what we want.
So if you start up the app, and I don't know if we got to the point where we were rendering like the game titles, but those 2 games, the objects would show up if we were listing those in that grid at this point.
Let's populate those real quick, shall we? And I think we did something similar on the view rentals, right? Is we did a on refresh, and I believe we just invoked this guy. Find all references. Didn't we? Oh, we did it. We just went through the command, I think. Yeah, so we did this on loaded. So this is one of the things, when the control is loaded, we go through and populate those. So we're going to do, I think, something similar here. Is we'll go in here and we'll say loaded, new event handler. Great. Code behind, we got an event handler. Oh, file sculpted namespace. Boom. Yay, indentation. Okay. If data context is catalog view model, right? View model, and then we need to do something. I don't know if we want a refresh button on these, or if we just wanted to have a method that's public async task load games, because we should probably do something to load the games, right? I think.
Yeah.
So, and then I think we can do await for each board game in game context, board games, do the needful, and then we need to do games dot add new game view model, passing in the game. We don't have a constructor. That's a problem, but we'll come back to that in a moment. This guy will... Go ahead.
How come you prefer doing the for each loop over like link methods? Could you do that in link using like an async for each? I don't know. Does that have that?
Yeah, so this is actually
like a map.
This is actually not a for each loop. I can see the confusion because I used the word for each in the name.
Okay. Whoever said C# was easy to read.
So this is abusing a newish language feature. So similar to how like you had hinted at Link doing the deferred execution, where you have the enumerator and you just iterate one at a time. This await in front of the for each is turning this into a async enumerator. So this is actually just pulling out one row from the database at a time. So under the hood, depending on your database implementation, EF Core will grab a cursor to your database table, and database cursors are very similar to Link IEnumerator objects, where they have a move next, give me current type pattern, where it's just iterate. So what this is actually doing is creating up one of those, pulling one of them back, and then adding into it. A lot of people will do things like, to list async or similar. The problem is that builds up a list in memory first and then dumps this out. Whereas this will start populating immediately. So in the event that we have a large board game collection, we'll start to see records getting added, going ding, 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 really quickly. And they'll come in as the individual row is ready. Now, do you want that, or do you want it to be a full drop in? That's kind of a judgment call.
So is this, so this is making a database call using cursors for every board game.
Using a single cursor for the board game's table and iterating over each row of it.
It seems like it could be problematic if your database was far.
It's possible. Versus bringing back the whole thing as one big set.
Or like paging through it, like give me 100 at a time or something like that.
Oh, certainly. So if we wanted to actually implement paging or similar, right? You would do something, take 100, or what is it? Does not contain. Yeah, so this take will end up breaking it. I'm trying to remember, you have to be careful between which extension methods you use for pulling back, between which ones are iQueryable and which ones are IEnumerable, because the queryable ones send the expression to the database to be evaluated,
right?
Versus the enumerable ones, which pull it back.
Gotcha.
And is it Chunk that does it? No, that's my own. No, it's not. There are various ones that go ahead and bring different ones back for doing it. In general, the cursor is not actually that expensive for bringing back one record at a time. It's usually fairly efficient because it's going to be bringing back one, especially if what you care about is seeing the initial collection populated quickly, and you say there's 50,000, right? If the user hasn't scrolled yet, we can, if it takes me a while to get the subsequent 40,000 to load up, not a big deal. Wow, 50,000 board games. I don't know how you even store that many. There's a physical limitation even on the tiny board game, 50,000 decks of cards. That's a lot of decks of cards.
I have 2.
Yeah, I don't even have that many. Okay, let's real quick get this constructor going. Board game. All right, let's see. Argument, null, exception, throw if null, game. Boom. Done.
So isn't there I don't know, maybe it was in C#8 or something, where you can enable it's like a null-free region where you don't need to do these null checks all over?
Yes, so we do have nullability enabled. I am paranoid though, because the nullable reference types are only as good as they are documented. And so one could make a very compelling argument that inside of this app, this null check is completely meaningless because I control every invocation of this method. If you're building a library, unless you can control the consumers in some way, you can't make that assumption, because somebody could consume your library and not have that turned on.
Gotcha.
I'm still paranoid, and I still null check things coming in because I would much rather get an argument null exception with a useful parameter name than a no reference exception and a line number.
Makes sense.
And
Does C# have what is it, like zero cost exception handling? I don't know that I could explain that very well, but I know it was a big deal in Python land that they added it.
interesting. I'm gonna go with I don't think so, only because I know exceptions are one of the most expensive things we can create. Because instantiating an exception is actually fairly expensive because it has to go back and build up the stack trace. That's one of the biggest hits. Like,
Oh, sorry, I didn't explain that very well. So it's basically like the way it works in Python is like if you have like a try catch, or it's in Python it's try except, there's zero cost if it doesn't hit the accept clause. Whereas there used to be some level of overhead, however small.
Got it. So yes, we do have what I assume to be the equivalent without fully understanding the feature. They would call it, or I should say, we would call it exception filters, right? So try, catch, exception E. We would do a when E, E dot message contains Joe.
Oh, that's pretty slick.
Right. So I can do this or something similar to this. And
Okay.
and so we can then we don't eat the cost of stopping at this catch block, because if you have to stop at the catch block, do some work, and then do a throw, you eat that cost, versus an exception filter where if you can tell it to not stop there, and it can then just keep looking up the stack for where it needs to be handled.
Gotcha.
A really great way to make a really horrible bug is if the code inside of this when method itself throws an exception. That's bad. Don't do that. You will not like the results. You end up with losing your original exception and you're going down. Like it's bad. Don't. Yeah. If you write an exception filter, make it not throw exceptions. And that does not mean wrap it up in a method and try catch the whole thing. That's also not the, if you're try catching inside of an exception filter, you're doing something wrong. Very, very, very wrong. But the exception filters can be quite good for when you want to filter down. It's like, I would like to catch exceptions A, B, or C typed, right? Rather than the other syntax, and have them all hit the same method. Okay.
Gotcha.
So we have all that. We've built this up. We've got load board games. Now, if we launch, it's going to be ugly. So let's make it not ugly really quick. So this items control is going to show all of our games, and we're going to do a real quick data template. This is in my opinion one of the awesomeness things of WPF land. Okay, we're just going to collapse that. I want all of my space. So in this case, I want to use local : game view model. Great. So this explicitly has, or I should say, has implicitly told it what I want, what the data context will be, because this is going to be a template for each item in the collection. So we've subtly switched data context inside of this. And in this case, we're just going to go with text block, text, binding, name. Just so that we have something to see. This template probably needs to be built out a little more to be cooler and prettier and happier. And then we launch.
And that binding is two ways. If you're doing something like an inputs value where you can change it. Or is it one way?
That is a great question. It depends. So see, we got two Joes. Yay! So we have added you twice. So the mode, so bindings themselves do have a mode property on here. In WPF, we have a lot more than one way. We have one way, two way, one way to source, because we like one way streets going both directions. It's like downtown Spokane. We have one time for if you just want to do it once and be done. And then you have default. which is what everything defaults to. Now, the beautiful thing about default is you actually don't know whether it's one way or two way.
It depends on the
It depends
element?
on the property under which the binding is sent to. So the text property on a text block, if we go here and find text, where are you?
It was there. It was.
I realize this is not the actual. Hang on. This is not what I want. This is my decompiler is lying to me. So if we go here and go text block dot text property. So, and maybe I should actually switch. So here is how it's actually implemented. There's the thing that we set it up against. But our binding engine isn't actually going to this property. That would make sense. No. Our binding engine is going against this dependency property. And this dependency property has additional metadata that calls out the type of the property and all of that. This is how the binding engine is fundamentally implemented at the base level of WPF. Is this whole thing declares extra stuff about the property. And the property metadata is what ultimately declares your binding mode. And you'll note this one's not explicitly setting anything, but if we look at text box, you'll note here, this guy, very similar. I've switched to text box, not text block, but you'll note there's this extra thing down here that says, hey, here's the default for it. So
okay,
yeah, so
that makes sense.
So the default mode of your binding is governed by the property under which it's bound to, which you have to look at its dependency property declaration to know its default state. In general, though, if it's an interactable property, it defaults to two-way, and if it's I'm sorry, this guy, I highlighted the wrong thing. Binds two-way by default. If it's an interactable property, it'll bind two-way by default. If it's not an interactive property, it will generally be one-way, and that's true for everything in WPF land. But that doesn't stop some third-party developer from going, that's dumb, I'm changing it from my property because my property should be two-way for reasons.
Does C# not have a way to do like passing arguments by their keyword or like the parameter name? Because I see all these comments, it's like the name of the parameter.
Oh, this is, I think, probably a artifact of the age of it. So,
okay. It's code that's been around for a while.
Yeah. So, like, for example, here, let's go and find a method that actually has a parameter. So if I do new catalog, see, this is going to be a learning moment, right? I can do game context : and then, something like this. So you can always specify the names of your parameters if you want to pass them in that way.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Which
is it like do you have to do positional ones first and then named?
Yes. Yeah. It's oftentimes used for methods that have a bunch of optional parameters where it's like, I only want to specify this optional one over here.
Okay.
But yes,
cool.
all the positional or non-optional ones first, and then you only have to specify the name. The name is only required when you want to jump. Like if you declare everything in order by type, the compiler goes, "Oh, I'm fine. That works." But sometimes people will still specify the name just for clarity. Like if you've got a method that takes 5 ints, unless like I don't know, like so maybe if it's something like a point and you take in 2 ints, I can probably infer what they are. But like
right.
Some of like the OpenCV libraries, they invert their X and Ys. Like I always think X comes before Y.
Right.
But some libraries do Y then X, and I realize they actually call it row column. It's like, but that means Y comes before X, and my brain hurts, and I get them backwards. And on the every time I interacted with those, I always was specifying the names because my brain couldn't grok the inversion.
Right. That makes sense.
Okay, so next thing we want to do is we want to clear this guy out on a successful save. So that'll be easy. We will just do New game name gets null. Boom, done. Because if we get past the save changes, that means the database save worked. So that should be able to get us yet one more.
Is there any reason you would want to set that to an empty string over null?
It won't actually matter. At the end of the day, the binding, like the text box itself is going to not send a null. It's going to put in an empty string. So as soon as any change occurs, it's going to just push empty string. It'll push either empty string or whatever's in there. So if we do foo, right? At least now it's clearing. And the last thing we want to do is close up this guy here. And we also don't have a good way of reloading that list yet. So we just have to relaunch the app. And then foo shows up and everyone's happy. Yay, foo. Okay. So this is where oftentimes people get really confused because they're like, well, what do I do? And there's a couple ways to go through and handle this situation. So option A, drawer host has a property that's like is right drawer open. So we could just give ourselves a property that's a bool that we could drive that goes open, close, open, close, open, close, right? Like, you know, drawer open, right? And then the view model comes in here and we do something like observable property, private bool, drawer open, boom, right? And we can come over here and go drawer open gets false, right? This is option A.
It is so cool. I've just got to say that you're getting IntelliSense over
Source generated stuff.
Yeah, it's like, and it's because it's what, like compiled? Whereas I don't know if that's the right word there.
I would say it's
generated.
It's the tooling support around it because the source generators are executed as part of the compiler itself, but actually getting that IntelliSense requires kind of the language service to do its job, which it's doing background compilations, which is how it then knows all the information to be able to push it through. I like, my opinion is .NET devs, we have been spoiled for years with awesome tooling. Like a lot of languages may be superior, but I'm like, our tooling's awesome. Like, frankly, flat out awesome.
This is like, I always like the one of the double-edged swords, if you will, of like Python, or more specifically Django, is Django does like a bunch of dynamic stuff. Like it adds things to your model classes, but the horrible part of it is you get no IntelliSense, or like if you're using a type checker, it basically just like you either have to do sort of some weird workarounds or just like kind of do the eject, which is just add like a type ignore, and it basically just disables like the type checking for the whole line.
Right. Kind of mitigates the usefulness of the feature.
Yeah.
So like,
but C#, it's like you've got your cake and you're eating it too. Here you've got dynamic stuff in a different way, but you still get your IntelliSense.
Consider this like recovery session 1 for you.
For real.
Okay, so that Boolean works, and we could certainly drive it that way as well. The only thing, like, this is a pattern I see people do a lot, and it totally works. Like, this works. The only thing that gives me a small twitch factor is this is sort of a very leaky abstraction where now the view model is making assumptions about what the view needs. And to some degree, it's the fact that I've named it drawer open, right? Like, view models should never contain UI objects in them, but I've now named a property with a UI class name, and so it's like, yeah. Like, you could argue that maybe if I renamed it, it cleaned it up, and I'm like, it works. It totally works. Like this, yes, it's just a twitch factor. So another approach that I like, and this works because the property in question is bindable. This pattern also falls apart if the thing you want to toggle isn't a bindable property. So the other option is doing something, and I might even do it down in my data level, right? So I could do let's do new class here and do something like board game created, right? And we're going to do public record class, file scope and namespace, and clean this up. And because we don't even need curly braces anymore. We are that cool. Okay, so we got basically an empty class that doesn't do anything, which is exactly what we need. And if we come over here, nope, not you, you. And we give ourselves one more itty bitty little dependency called an iMessenger. So
Where is that coming from?
it is magic.
But like, where's that interface defined?
So that interface is something that is also coming from the Community Toolkit MVVM. And then specifically
Okay.
our
Gotcha.
DI registration for it is right here. So I specifically have said, hey, for anybody who asks for an iMessenger, we're going to feed them the weak reference messenger. There's also a strong reference messenger. And the whole idea with this is he's a pub sub model, right? He can publish messages, people can subscribe to messages, and by being a weak reference one, he's not going to hold references to those people who have subscribed to messages, right? Because we don't want to accidentally have him hold, because he tends to be a very globally type object. I really don't want him holding on to references to things because that could keep things alive for ages, and I just don't want that. So we use the weak reference one. But in this case, all we're going to do is we're going to save him, and down here what we can do is we can go messenger, send, new, board game created, right? And again, it's a minor thing. We can then come up here in our view and say, you know what? It would be really nice if we could register for this guy, right? Like I want this messenger, and I'm intentionally doing it this way, just so that I have a reference. I want to do something like messenger, register all, this. And then this guy here, as long as he implements an I recipient of board game created. Don't fix formatting, implement interface. Thank you. Down here, what this guy can do is he can say, okay, if I give my drawer host a name, so we will call our drawer host because that won't be confusing at all. Then this guy here can go is right drawer open, false. So this is a lot of indirection to set the exact same property, just to be clear. A lot of indirection for the exact same thing.
So if you were actually going to do it that way, you would add iMessenger as like using DI, like you would just move it to the constructor of the catalog view.
Correct. And then have this go through and do it. And then the only thing we've gained by doing this is now the catalog view model isn't this leaky abstraction. All it knows is that, hey, when we've saved a game, I clear out my previous state, and then I just notify the rest of the app that I created a thingy. I don't want to think. And actually, we might even go as far as to say, await load games async, right? And this guy should probably games.clear. That way, when we add one, we can reload it.
So why did you put it? I'm surprised you chose to put the board game created inside your data folder.
Because I secretly have aspirations. Because I secretly have ideas that it might be cool to, rather than have it. No, bad Copilot. That's not what I wanted. Try again. Because I was kind of, on some other projects, I've done things where I do like save changes, right? And then based upon what is changed here, we go through and post out messages to say, hey, by the way, the following stuff was created. That way the view model doesn't need to remember to post the message. The view model can just be blind and stupid and say, I saved to the database, but then the DB context goes, I got you. Let me go ahead and post some messages out. Secretly, I've already done this.
You're going to pull the cake out of the oven?
Well, so this whole thing started. Remember how we had this discussion at one of our meetings about building budget applications, because every developer, apparently this is something every developer must build at some point, is their own budgeting app. I've clearly done that already, because, and it's a WPF app because my user base, all one of them, really wanted a WPF app. But on my DB context here, you'll note it takes in a messenger. Share a link if anybody's interested. It takes in a iMessenger, and then down inside of my save changes, you'll note that I arguably jumped through some hoops that were probably more than needed to be jumped through, but it then goes through all of the items that were changed. It's got this whole, like, I did code-based DB triggers because reasons. Yes, I'm aware that there's third-party libraries. Yes, I did it anyway, right? But then I go through and I look at the event type of, oh, is this a new record? Are we updating an existing record? And then it goes through and registers up a bunch of messages to be posted about where they're going. I don't know if this is necessarily better, but...
This seems to me like if you went really heavy on this sort of like event-driven design, it could start to get somewhat complex, like where stuff is coming from.
Absolutely, 100%. And that's where this is also something that I don't know if it necessarily scales out well for cloud-based setups. This is also where a lot of people will push for like a repository pattern, where rather than having your view model act on the DB context directly, there's some sort of, say, board game repository class, and it exposes methods like create board game, right? And it's responsible for building up the data objects, saving it to the database, sending the message, and all of that through. And then nothing else goes to the database directly. Everything flows through these repository patterns, and so there's a centralized place to wrap up all of that logic. This arguably flattens that all into one place, and you are correct, could get very confusing at times.
Mm-hmm.
So for what it's worth, that's the only reason I put it there, is because that was the structure. I don't know which way we actually want to do this. Like, one could argue that a cleaner option is to pull this guy and just use the view model. The other thing that doesn't work is I can't do this.
Oh, okay. That's what I was thinking, how you would add that.
That is exactly what we want to do, but this doesn't actually work right now. And the only reason this doesn't work right now is because I don't have these views being DI injected. So, and specifically because these views live at this level, right? Now we could go and fix that. That's a thing we could change, but WPF was built before a lot of DI. Well, I won't say before DI was really a big thing. It wasn't a driving pattern, right? The idea of the view models and the data context being DI injected was sort of one of the things that WPF went, yeah, that's not our problem to solve. Which is really unfortunate, because like when they shipped without things like, arguably they should have had a relay command in the box. The fact that I had to, like, there's no relay command implementation in the box with WPF. Everybody either rolls their own implementation of iCommand or pulls a third-party library. You should pull a third-party library.
Is there a newer version or like a newer way of doing desktop apps using C#?
There are, so the current Forerunner options are, so Maui is one, because Maui is the cross-platform, the multiple application UI, and it will let you build a desktop app with their version of XAML, because XAML is versioned itself, and they've got the latest 2009, I think is the version, and it adds things like compiled bindings and generics, which is cool, because WPF XAML doesn't even have generics because it came out before generics did, so that's not a thing. which is kind of unfortunate. The other front runner is WinUI 3, which is what the Maui application actually produces for the desktop. WinUI 3 is supposed to be the WPF killer because it has the XAML setup. You can do basically all the same stuff that you would do in WPF, only in WinUI 3. The problem is it hasn't quite reached feature parity, and some of the stuff is just a metric pain in the butt to use. The Windows app, like WPF, is trivial. You install the workload in Visual Studio, you go File, New Project, you give it a name, you hit Enter, and you're done. WinUI 3, a little bit bigger of a pain in the butt. And for a long,
and that's a first-party library.
Yes, and it's supposed to be. It has some features in it that, like for example, if we take the calculator app, right? You'll note that the calculator may be a bad example, especially in dark theme. Some of the Windows apps, you'll note you get that acrylic. It's not a transparent look through because that's a security thing of all things. But you can get that acrylic look in the background. That's something WPF struggles to have. You have to pull basically a third-party library if you want anything like that. And that's something that it comes with. The problem I have with WinUI 3 is Microsoft has said that they're putting out a WPF killer when they did UWP, WinUI, and WinUI 2. And I think we can conclude that none of those killed WPF. So I'm not holding my breath on WinUI 3, only because they've said it 3 times now already, and I'm starting to feel like a boy who cried wolf scenario. Mr. X does point out, if you want to go third party rather than first party, the 2 common options, Avalonia has been getting very, very popular, and then Uno is the other big one. And they both build on a lot of the newer stuff to be able to build out. Technically, something like Unity is also an option, but it's really heavily focused on game dev and not like line of business type applications. So depending on what you're doing, you pick your favorite. So
gotcha.
But if you want to go third party, that is an option. And Avalonia did roll out like some material design stuff too, heavily based on my library, which I thought was hilarious. Okay, which way do we want to do this? Messenger or just a simple property?
It feels like the property is it's interesting to see the messenger in use, unless you were trying to set something up with your board game created file.
Nope. We can kill it. At some point,
Kill it all.
At some point, at some point, I think I'm going to update. So the other thing I'm going to point out, self promotion moment for just a second. I have gotten annoyed at the amount of effort that it takes me to create new projects. So I have built .NET templates out for actually doing all of this stuff. Like, so for example, I've got 3 at the moment, and I'm working on a Blazor one as well because I want it. Because I wanted to be able to go .NET new WPF app and be happy. So I can do .NET new Kebu WPF, and I get out a WPF application that's basically spec'd out, in my opinion, what a modern WPF app should be laid out with. So it's got the full generic host DI setup. It's got the unit testing plugged in. It's got the directory build props. It's set up to use centralized package management. Nullable reference types are enabled. All the goodies are in the box. And I've been thinking about adding more to it because I've been using this template now on several apps, and there's a few more things that I find myself adding to it that I keep poaching for my other apps. And I'm like, you know what? I should just put it in my template. If people don't like it, they can delete it. But I like this. And now every time people ask me, how should I start my new app? Rather than trying to give them a line of directions for setting all this stuff up, because it takes, I think it takes me like 25 minutes to do, which is annoying. I can just go .NET new. Same for like NuGet packages. I was annoyed when you want to build a new class library and deploy as a NuGet, how much of a pain in the butt it is. So I built one out that has all the setup that I like. Or console apps.
Nice.
Same thing. So, okay. Shameless self-promotion. Okay, there. We're going with property. Let's just make sure it works. Let me ship. Here, what's happening?
And you added the load games async call. Okay, so it should like dynamically update now
Yep.
too.
So, please update. Go.
Does it give you like control enter to submit out of the box?
Not exactly. We can do that though, because that might be kind of nice. There's certain areas where you get the enter key behavior. There's a property called was it accepts return or default key? I'm trying to remember the name of it, but it's mostly around like dialogues to be able to auto submit. But we can go through and add something similar to do that. So the magical incantation. Text box. Let's see. Text box. What is it? Input binding, I think. The magical key. Dang nabbit. Copilot, stop spoiling the ending. And you can do something like that.
Nice.
So we can wire it up to make sure that it goes through. And
can it do like right now that's just enter? What if you want to do like control enter?
oh no, it's not key. It's gesture. As you can see, it's horribly complicated. Yeah, Mr. X, there, thank you. Mr. X reminds me, is default is the magical property you can set on a button that will tell it that it is the default action for being able to do it. I can't remember if is default works inside of a drawer host. We should test. So control enter. Booyah.
Wonderful.
So if you want to do custom things like wire it up to something else, that works just fine. And you can obviously mix and match to your heart's content for any key stroke and whatnot. Text box gets a little weird if you set this thing up for like a multi-line text box, because now you have to deal with what does enter key mean if I'm in a multi-line text box and like a button has an is default. Like there's some fun combinations that you can get yourself into where you might need to tweak some properties around in order to make it work, but for the most part, it just works.
I like the way I think browsers handle it pretty well natively. Like in a text area, enter adds a new line, but then actually I think text area elements might even eat a control enter, so you have to like tab to the next to like a normal input and to do it.
And you can get yourself into that same situation with WPF because of like order of precedence and different things. So you just kind of you have to decide what you want that gesture to mean. But a simple input binding is an easy way of making it go through and work. Okay.
Nice.
I'm going to propose that we do a commit.
How many files do we have?
Addition of game catalog. See, that's a good example of control enter working just fine. I didn't even review the stuff. Oh, and I made a mess. Hang on. Board game created. We aren't using it. We should delete it. And then
you'll be happy to hear I installed Gitkraken earlier today.
Oh, that does make me happy. Catalog. Amend, push, force push, force push. Hopefully nobody pulled in that period of time, because I just rewrote history because I did not make any mistakes. No mistakes here. So just going to quickly scan what we did. Oh, I probably shouldn't have included the topmost in there. Oh, well, we'll revert it in a minute. For the most part, it's fine. Okay, cool. Okay, what type of thing would you like to do next? Because we've at least got the fly out ad. I'm also aware that we're at 9 or at 11 p.m. So
what would be something super cool?
So we could go through and see about slapping in some sort of like styling on these guys here to make them be a little more interesting and not, as ugly as what we want.
Can you get so on your like view rentals Oh, wait. So with those games now, can you add a new rental? Oh, we didn't hook it up to
We
actual
we,
games.
we do not actually have that. We could go plug that in. We now have a games catalog.
Yeah, I guess it's probably worth getting the current screens all wired up to each other before moving on to something too crazy.
So you're proposing adding the list of games in here, right? Is that the?
Oh, so you did like a modal here.
No, I didn't. It's actually just a
Oh wait.
card.
Oh, it's just with margin. Oh, I
Yeah,
see.
it's just a card with a margin sitting around it. Like in retrospect, I probably should consider something similar on all of them because it is a difference in UI between each of them.
Yeah.
But I was having fun and enjoying
Can
my.
you do like a template inheritance type stuff with your XAML files?
To some degree, yes. You can definitely do composition of pulling things together, and you can do reuse of templates wherever you would like. There's not templates themselves don't have an inheritance hierarchy though. Styling does, sort of like how CSS you can kind of group things together. But in XAML we have a single inheritor. So we can't do like polyglot things of I want to base my new style on styles A and B. It's like no. You got to kind of put those in a list going straight down. There's not a way to mix and match them. So
Okay. Interesting.
kind of like these things here is I've got a style. It's targeting a text block, or I should say it's based on the previous text block style. So you can get these things where it's like you can only be based on one thing at a time. But you wanted to go here, right? And do the list of games in this. So we actually had this in.
As a side note, I'm curious. I was just thinking about it when we were looking at some DB context stuff. Did you see that thread on Yammer or Viva Engage about the like ORM active record stuff? Does that ring a bell?
It does. I don't remember. Hang on, looking.
It got some comments from some heavy hitters like Andrew, Artem, and Kelly.
Oh yes. This pattern. This one. Link, share, boom, done. I don't know if I think this came through at a point where I was busy and I never actually dug into it.
Yeah, I think Andrew he pointed out that it was a most of what this article talked about was not necessarily ORM problems, but more like problems with bad ORMs. I was curious on your take on it, though. But
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think I actually read this yet. Probably should. It looks interesting.
yeah, no worries. I was just curious.
I will.
And I don't know who this guy is. Like, I don't know if he's. I don't know anything about him.
Cal Patterson, clearly.
Clearly, yeah. Let's do the add rental.
Okay.
Or loan.
So step one, I'm going to add a new row to our grid. We're going to bump the button down to row 3. This is one of the things some tooling will do, like when you add a row, it'll automatically update the row numbers for you. Specifically, JetBrains products will do that for you, which is wonderful and makes me sad that we don't have it built in the box. What type of interface for picking a list of games? Because this is theoretically multi-selection. Do we want like a list with checkboxes or?
I I built this stupid custom component that was like for a select, like a multi-select. And instead of being able to type in to search to like filter it down easily, you have to like or horizontally scroll and like click on each thing that you want to toggle on. And the more I use it, the more I hate it.
Excellent.
So I wouldn't recommend.
Oh, you wouldn't recommend a horizontal scroll to go through, but I agree with you. Let's see. There are
What
some.
does material offer?
So there's various things. So they've got styling for like your regular checkbox. We do have toggles. We do have these maneuvers here where we can go wee.
Woo.
Like
Toggles.
we've got those types of toggles. We've got like lists of things like because we
Here.
can combine the toggles into here.
Can we do something like this? Let me send you a screenshot on.
We can.
Should I send it on? I'll send it on Teams.
Hey, welcome, Benjamin. I hope traveling is going well for you.
Oh, is he joining from?
He's joining
Is
from
that-
wherever in the world he is.
Is that BAM?
Yeah.
I sent you a screenshot on Teams to Andrew's cat gallery,
Oh, that's terrifying.
but it's got this like tags multi-select thing where it's like a
Oh, so
drop down.
you're gonna make this hard for me. Okay, so you want a combo box drop down with check boxes on a multi-list thingy.
Yeah.
So for reference, is this in the box? No. Can we go and slap this together really quick? Yes. Okay, we're gonna have to piece together some pieces. So I think what we're gonna do, I think the easy, because people have asked for this multiple times. The biggest issue I have is I don't like the idea of styling out a combo box, and I probably should, right? Because this is what people are expecting is they want this behavior. The problem is the combo box behavior in WPF is built around single item selection, which is why I go, you want something that looks like a combo box, but you don't actually want the behavior of a combo box. And in WPF, the look of a control and the behavior of the control are separate. So if all you want is a control to look a different way, trivial. That much they made easy. But because the behavior here is so much focused on single item selection, I don't think it's what we want. And I think what we want instead is one of these guys here. Is we want something like this that's a pop-up box where the button looks like a combo box, but when you click on it, it opens up one of these, and obviously this has stuff on the left, but we want checkboxes over there, and then those there. So I think that's what we want.
Ideally, typing in the input filters your elements in your list.
See, now you're immediately making this hard. Because how do you do typing in your input? Oh, hang on. Alternate proposal then. What if we did go with a regular combo box? Combo box. Where did they go? Right? Because regular combo boxes have this, like how you have this search, right? Because you want to be able to do like Apple, right?
Yeah.
And have it get picked. What if we do a combo box? That way we can get this kind of behavior. But when an item is selected, we clear it from the combo box, and then we add in where's the little picker thingy mabobber? Because we've got the little chips. It's under chips.
So you put those in the combo box?
We don't necessarily put those in the combo box, but I'm wondering about putting a row of those above. So as things are selected in the combo box, these things show up in a list, and then maybe we let the user like close them out if they want, right? Because like there's the delete. I'm wondering if maybe something like that works.
Yeah, I'm down for it. I'm trying to see if I can find a better, like something like this. No, that's not it. Here we go. So here's another example of the good old select two.
Select two. Okay, so let's see.
This one doesn't show the inputs, but as you type, you can use arrows to like select stuff, and it's sort of using like a chip-ish thing. But you can also like delete them by doing backspace. Let me see if there's a
multi-select pillbox.
Multi-select. Oh, okay. So Angular's material components don't seem to let you type. You can only
You can only pick, and that doesn't surprise me. The ability to type and have this kind of behavior, because this is definitely not something that's in the box, but I like, because I do like this idea of giving the combo box for the selection, but then doing the chips or the pills for showing them. I think that works well. There's not one in here, is there? I don't think so. I think the chip is the closest one.
And the chips is what what that cat gallery does if you select some. So actually, you have access to this. So let me just send you the link.
So I'm looking to see if there's, because people have asked for various controls to be added for the material design library to do this.
Yeah, I feel like I used it at one point, so I thought it was more common than it was, but it actually doesn't seem super common to have both the like checkbox or like kind of toggles with the chips as well as like the textual input.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I'm wondering about is these types of inputs seem really focused on the idea of a small number of selections, right? Like if I had an input like this and I wanted to put in a dozen items, as soon as these items fill up the width, I feel like that's mildly problematic for me. And I'm not sure I like that anymore.
Yeah,
It seems like it's really good for if you only expect a small number of selections. And I think at least in my use case here, loaning out board games, it's fairly common for somebody to borrow half a dozen.
Yeah, it does. So this one like starts to vertical wrap and looks a little meh.
Yeah, but I do. So let's go down this route though, because I kind of like the idea of having the combo box plus the list of chips. So we can slap that together. That we can do, right?
I like it.
So item source, binding. Okay, so actually, before we get too carried away, maybe let's build this out from the view model side first. So add rental view model. So we're going to need a couple things. First thing we need a public observable collection of board game. Board games. Ding, ding, ding. Do the needful. It's going to look real similar here in a minute. Binding operations, enable collection synchronization, board games, new, da, da, da. Okay, perfect. Got that. Let's see. Another suggestion is maybe 2 list boxes with a move left, right makes sense here too. I could see something like that of, pick the ones.
Can you put images in
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
the Twitter, or not the Twitter, the Twitch chat?
So the beautiful thing about WPF is most of our things are content controls, which means we can embed arbitrary content inside of them. It's my favorite thing when WinForms developers start mocking WPF, is I tell them to put an image inside their button with some text, and then watch them struggle. It's great because for us, we do a stack panel, an image, and a text block. We're done. It's like, have fun. So yeah. But let's start here, because regardless of what we do, we need this. We're going to need some sort of observable property, and this is where, let's see, private board game. Let's do selected board game. Right, I kind of want to build it this way just to show how to do it. And then we want a public observable collection board game. I don't know, selected games, right? This is the most beautiful thing. Boom. Selected games. Boom. Okay, so we got that. We're going to need to load these thingies up. I'm going to just straight up steal some code here real quick. Because it's not plagiarism if you steal from yourself. Let's see. What did I call it? Oh, this one's called DB context. And then we want board games, clear board games, and this is just going to be straight up add of the DB object. And then we're going to do a little loaded thing here. Hang on. Come on. Autocomplete. There you go. Boom. Okay, Copilot, here's your chance. Be awesome. Copilot, you are not impressing me. There we are. No, you fail. That was too much to hope for. I wanted you to impress me, Copilot. You did not impress me. I mean, I left you an app with multiple examples in it. I wanted it to figure it out. Okay. Okay, so that guy launches, that guy loads.
Does that need a task return?
Great question. It can't. So async void in most C# is bad. However, there is one case where async void is acceptable, and it is top level event handlers. So this is an event handler, and event handlers have to have, or depending on the delegate type of the event, in this case routed event handler has a return type of void, so you can't make it task returning. So this is the one case where async void is allowed, and the reason why async void was added as a feature. But
how
it should be
event been a keyword in C#
since 1.0.
Oh. Interesting.
It's a lot of more modern frameworks don't necessarily use events, because an event is just basically a list of delegates to be invoked. And the problem being is most of the time people want to start getting fancier with order of operations, because you don't necessarily control the order of the list. You do plus equals, which says add item to list. You do minus equals, which says remove item from list if it exists. But you don't really control the order. Like, you can go and get the delegate list and do some magic yourself if you want, but it's a little more unusual. More modern things favor more direct invocation rather than the indirectness of events.
Where is that loaded? Is that loaded thing coming from, like a global using?
No, so this is coming from the base class of rental view. So it's not obvious because I've deleted the base class definition, but the base class of add rental view is user control. So if we chase down the UI hierarchy all the way down, I believe it loaded exists on framework element, if I'm not mistaken. Loaded, yes. So that's where it exists.
Oh, I see.
So it's like 4 levels deep in our hierarchy, but it is there. Okay, so that will go there. That will load. That will put everything in place. Okay, now combo box time. Let's see, combo box, grid, row, and we'll put the chips above it, I think. Yeah, that way the drop down doesn't cover them up. I think that makes sense. So you're going to go in grid row 2. You're going to have an item source. We are going to bind you to the board games. We're going to do a display member path of name. And we are going to do a selected item will be bound to selected board game. Done. Okay, so there's the combo box. When people say WPF's hard, it's easy. Let's see. I kind of like the outline style. What do you think? Or do we want to go with a filled approach one again?
I think outline looks better for a combo box.
I agree with you. Let's grab his style. Boom, boom. Be pretty. Okay, so you go there. You go there. That's fine. Why has my button moved up so much? Grid row 0, 1. Oh, because I added 2 and I only incremented that once. Okay. There is a fun thing on grid. Show grid lines. True. This makes your grid look uglier than all get out, but it shows blue and yellow dashed lines on where your rows and columns are. For debugging, should never be used outside of debug.
Oh, that's not one of those like
Design time ones.
things.
Well,
Gotcha.
well, so show grid lines, true, right? This is now applying to your real app. But if I were to do D colon, now it's only design time.
Ah.
So you
can put anything after D colon.
yeah, and make it a design time only property. So if you only want to see grid lines in design time, that's an option. That's one of those features that I don't feel like gets enough love or enough attention. It's rather clever. Okay, so next thing we need to do is when not you, go away. When this guy gets a value, we want to actually pop him into the selected games. So remember how I showed you how there were all of those partial methods that the source generator did for us? So on selected board game changed, and I think we only care about the new value. So we'll just do this one. All right, so when the value change, selected games dot add value. And we should probably null check it too. So if value is not null, then we'll add it, because I don't really want to add null when we clear it. Right? And then I think what we will do is selected board game gets null. So this is one of those things that you should be careful with. This is how you cause stack overflows.
Yeah.
Is calling back on yourself repeatedly. However, the nice part with property changes is the built-in thing. The first thing that thing generates is an if check of, is the new value different than the old value? If the answer is no, it stops. Thank goodness.
Oh, I see.
So you don't just...
So you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, because that... So we'll do this. We'll add it in. We'll null that out. And then what we need...
Do we need to remove it if it's null from the list?
Oh, from here?
Or from there? Or
good question. Let's try it without, and then let's come back, because it probably would make most sense to... Because it doesn't make sense to let somebody pick the same game multiple times. And we might want a distinct list or similar. So we're going to do an items control again. So an items control in WPF is... no, not selected board game. An items control is sort of the most basic of collections in WPF. It allows you to basically just repeat over a set and apply a template to them, which is great. But there are a lot of controls that derive from items control, like list view, list box, data grid. All of those things are similar. But sometimes we just want the low-level stuff. The big disadvantage of items control is it doesn't have built-in selection or scrolling. If you want that, you have to add it. It's literally just the repeat. But in this case, I think that's actually to our advantage. And then I want to go grab that chip. So I think I want this one. Yeah, sure. We probably aren't going to use the icon bit. So hang on. Data template, data type, board game. That is not the right data type, but I just want to paste it real quick. So this is going to be X type, and I don't think we've actually included the namespace for our data directory yet. I don't see it. So XML NS data gets CLR. What? Well, that one. Yeah, it is CLR namespace. Why are you being mean to me? Okay, so this is data board game, and now it's happy. Okay, so
that's like changing your context for that item.
Correct. Yeah, and we may want to put an icon in at some point, but we don't have an icon right now, so we're just gonna drop that. We don't have a tooltip. Is deletable. We'll leave it to be true. We'll leave that for now. I don't want to delete click. We want this to be binding on the name of the game, and then we don't need a click on that either. So we're going to do that. And now it just works like a chart. Oh, wait. We didn't do it. Hang on. We got to change one thing. So the only other thing I didn't like is the items control. It's the layout that it's doing. I think we want it to go horizontally, not vertically. So if we change its items panel up, and we do a items panel template, and we do a wrap panel, boom, there, that's better. So a wrap.
So will that wrap to the next line when it hits its maximum width?
Yep.
Gotcha.
Okay, so come here, new rental, loan to Joe, and Joe would like to borrow foo. Oh, right, we put that in the wrong grid rows. So hang on, we can fix this. Grid row 1. Boom. Okay, so now it didn't clear that out, which is a little annoying to me that didn't propagate. Didn't we clear it? I want to make sure that we're actually getting Joe. So selected board game. The operation is not legal in its current state. What? I am confused. What was not legal?
It seemed like something with hot reload was.
Yeah, it was like
Showing my cursor.
It didn't. Okay, so if I go Joe, step. Wow. Edits were made which cannot be compiled.
If you disable hot reload, does it work?
So that's there. I wonder if it's the live share messing with the debugger. So that cleared that out. I'm a little. So we're gonna snoop this guy real quick.
Here, I'll leave the live share so that I'm not even using. Actually, it looks like I don't even know if I'm still.
You are still in it. I see you. Okay, so I want to look at this. Okay, so I want to take a quick gander at this combo box. Let's see, combo box. We're going to look here, and I want to look at his selected item. So his selected item is nulled out, but he still has that. Oh, is this what I need to null out to clear? Oh, okay, hang on. I got you. Selected value. Boom. I think that works.
Interesting. What's the difference there?
So the difference being there are multiple ways to display a list of items in a combo box. I'm going to make sure this works. Nope, that didn't work out either. Why did you not do this? Typically selected item, because you can set display member path, and then you can do selected value path, because sometimes you want your selected value to not be the whole object itself, but a property on your object, which generally selected value will then end up being the value, not the whole item. In this case, because we haven't set that up, selected item and selected value, I would expect to end up being equal. But clearly that is not happening. And I'm wondering if interesting. So those things are just I don't remember the order under which this does it. Oh, so that triggered twice. Oh, so it's going through multiple times. That's annoying. I think what's biting us is that recursive nature of what we've set. Because
That it's setting it to null.
Yeah, I think that's what's biting us. So let's go back to there, and I think all we need to do is just set it back to null after the update occurs. So we just basically need to queue it up to occur later. And we can do that fairly easily. Do we have a dispatcher? We do. Okay, I normally don't like bringing the dispatcher in directly, but in the interest of simplicity and time, we're just going to bring in the dispatcher directly. Because he's already registered in the DI container. Normally, I would wrap this guy and slap him behind an interface because this is very much a UI object that really has no place of landing in here. But inside of here, if we do dispatcher begin invoke.
Oh, so this like kind of queues it up for like the next cycle.
Correct. Specifically on the UI thread. So this property change, because it's occurring from a combo box selection, is coming in on the UI thread. This will then kick it to be the next pass around, and I think that will probably handle it. I'm willing to bet the combo box is the order of operations problem of it's making a change and the change is coming back through. There we go. Oh, this isn't an editable combo box. We need to make you editable so I can type. Combo box is editable. True. Boom. Okay. So I want to be able to type in. Oh, that's actually somewhat problematic. Because as soon as it matches, it's immediately selecting the item. Ooh, that's an interesting problem. So we might want to do selected item.
How is it matching?
Because there's only, for example, there's only one thing that starts with F. So if I type in F, it's immediately matching foo and adding, and that becomes the selected item, and then it's immediately going all the way in.
Oh, I see.
So it's
like the autocomplete is selecting that first.
Correct. Oh, I want update source trigger, and I think I want to do this. And now it's not setting it until I explicitly tab out. That's better for that purpose, but it would be nice if I didn't have to have it lose focus. I want it to do an auto. I want it to basically commit on enter of selection, right?
Like when you press enter or click on one of the combo box items?
Yeah, because the question is when is the user done, right? Is if I type in JOE, am I done here? If I hit space, am I done? Because I have a feeling what we're going to end up needing to do is actually watch the relevant events when we want the user to be done. Because we don't actually get notified of item clicked inside the combo box.
One thing that I've seen before is like as you're typing in this sort of input, as you press space, it sort of converts the last word from just text into like a little chip, and it'll render it in the combo box or whatever element.
Right.
But
so you're saying here space should actually trigger it, assuming this is a fully completed thing.
Yeah, I guess if you had sort of, basically like two-way binding, then as you're typing in that combo box and you're adding spaces, it's adding. Oh man, this seems like a tricky.
Yeah, well, and
it's like this thing could get complex.
Well, and it could, but I'm wondering if like in our case, the like if we had foo and foo2 as game names, right? That's not likely to occur. Like you're gonna have to disambiguate at some point. I'm just not sure where the right point is. I'm somewhat tempted to just wire up on the enter key, and when the enter key is hit, commit it.
Or if you click on something, but you said you can't hook into that.
Yeah, well, I don't. Well, let me confirm. So the hard part is the pop-up for a combo, or the drop-down for a combo box is displayed in a pop-up, and that shows up in a separate window. So if we click here, if I click foo, the combo box item handles it. We could grab this So the nice part, so in WPF, events have what are called tunneling and bubbling. So when you actually do something in Windows like click, that event starts at your top level window and tunnels down through your XAML until it finds the element that it hits. And then it bubbles back up through your XAML, indicating what it was. So the preview mouse down is your tunneling one, where it started at the top level window and then worked its way all the way down until it got to the combo box item. And then it bubbled back up all the way from the combo box item back up through the stack. Or I guess technically it went all the way down to the text block inside, then bubbled up. The combo box item marked it as handled, but it does bubble all the way up through this.
Like it continues bubbling even after it's handled.
Correct. The thing is if all you do is register for, like, say, mouse down, it doesn't, you won't see the event. Now, there's a special registration you can go and do where we could register up on the combo box and say, give me all of the mouse click events, even if they're handled. And I don't think there's a special combo box one. Yeah, I don't, let me check. I don't think combo box has anything specific to itself to indicate that it was handled. I mean, to some degree though, we could watch the click event and say, if this was handled by a combo box item inside of the combo box, we know what was clicked on. But I don't think there's an actual, because it knows when it's opened, it knows when it's closed. The other thing is you almost want to pop the drop down as the user's typing, right? Like the default behavior of the combo box doesn't show it expanded, and you almost want it expanded anytime the focus is inside of here. That does.
Yeah, because you can't just type in any old string. It has to be one of the specific values.
Binding. Well, let's turn that on real quick. So we can do that. That part's easy. Relative source self, and then I want to bind on is drop down. No, not is drop down open. Is keyboard focus within. So now, if the keyboard focus is inside of here, we're going to restart because I don't think it's able to pick that up. Keyboard focus is inside of here. The drop down is open, should follow that. Let's see, a two-way to one-way. So, oh, this wants a two-way binding. No, we ain't two-way binding this sucker. Mode one way. Because it's saying when the drop down closes, it wants to set that value back into is keyboard focus within. It's like, no.
Oh, I see. So that is drop down open is by default two-way.
Yeah. Because is drop down open is a user interactable property, right? The user can interact to toggle that property, therefore it defaults in two-way. But now,
does it give you arrows here?
Like the drop down arrow?
Like on the keyboard?
Like if I do this?
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I could go through here and then I could hit enter.
And that closes it and sort of...
Right, and right now, because I've set it as on lost focus, but I am wondering if maybe what we want to do is handle the click and handle like, oh, how am I inside of here and not have, oh, interesting. I was able to get, with the click, I'm able to now get inside of here. The pop-up closes and the binding's not re-triggering because it doesn't know that it needs to.
Which binding?
The is drop down open.
Oh, I see.
Like, and this might just be one of those cases where we have to set this guy up so that we watch clicks and enter to be able to do what we need. That's probably not that bad. Let's just do that really quick, because we can do that very easily. So, Oh, we can't do it here. We have to, because I just finished telling you, you can't do a normal registration. Let's see. I need to give that combo box a name so I can reference it. Game drop down. Game drop down. What is it? Add handler. And then we need to tell it the routed event. This is going to be mouse down event. Let's see. On mouse down. Handled events to true. So you specifically have to do that. And then we have to create ourselves a routed event handler. So private void on mouse down. And you have to go and then memorize the signature of what this event is. So this is a routed event, so I just know that it's going to be a routed event handler, which we should go here. Actually, where's the easiest way? If we just do routed event handler, we can then F12 on it. That's your signature. Void return. On mouse down. Okay, so if e dot handled equals true, and e dot, let's see, I think, I'm trying to remember which one comes through. I think it's source. Source will be the combo box. Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna see the handled by in here. Let's just catch it and see what happens.
Why is that just an old warning? I guess not. The on mouse down on 14.
New routed event handler. Because it doesn't, the signature on add handler wants a delegate, and people often forget when registering events, like I just did, that you actually have to instantiate a delegate instance. The problem is the compiler team has done too much work to make that hidden from you and behind the scenes in most cases, where you don't have to think about it. And so people forget that it's actually a thing that you're supposed to do. Okay, so I want to do this with keyboard so I don't trigger this. Now, if I click here, okay, so what do I get inside of this? One of you I want to be the... Oh, I guess we could get much better if we cast the event args, we get more information. Let's see. Suppressed. Original source is the grid. Source is the combo box. We don't...
Is that what you were looking for? The combo box, or?
No, I was kind of hoping to know that they clicked on an item and what the item was itself. And we could walk up the tree and find it. And this is where it may get ugly.
Wouldn't it be going down the tree?
Well, so original source, I believe, will be coming from... actually, original source is huge. No, actual height 31. So this grid, I believe, is the grid of that's holding the content inside of the combo box item. Because this original source is only 31 pixels tall.
Oh.
Device independent pixels, but yes. So this is the one that was actually that actually triggered the mouse down event, the one that started the whole bubbling event back up. Now, walking through
is that foo row?
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yes, because if I let this breakpoint go and we go and snoop this thing, if we go and look at... Oh, stop it. Why are you not wanting to stay open anymore? If I look here, you'll see this here. I'm willing to bet it's this grid right here or this grid wrapper. So one of these two going up my hierarchy is likely the original one when I click on it. And if we look at the event on here, mouse down, grid. I'm surprised. I would have expected it to be one of the individual grids. The fact that it showed that it didn't show a, oh, I wonder if it's because before I didn't click, I clicked like here and I missed there. That's probably what it was. If you click on the text portion of it, the text block itself will be the original source. But if you click and don't hit the text, you end up hitting the grid behind it, which is this grid here.
So either way, can you work up from those elements to your...
We could work up to the combo box item from them. All right, so if original source is here, so there's a thing called the visual tree helper, get parent, and then you do e.original source, right? And then you end up, we have to slap this guy in a loop basically to start walking up the tree to stop either when he returns null, because get parent returns null once you get to the top at like your window, or if we've hit a combo box item or our combo box, which the fact that this is coming from a mouse event that we know is bubbling, we should hit ourselves before we hit the top of the window. Otherwise, I question how this routed event got triggered. So that would be one option. I'm just wondering if it makes sense to keep trying to beat the combo box into submission versus roll our own pop-up box.
Oh, I see. Like a
Because
like an input that you manually control the pop-up.
correct. Yeah, because that's the thing is, if we like the behavior of combo box and we just want it to look differently, we can restyle it easy enough. But I think the issue is we're fundamentally struggling against the behavior of it, which means we may want a different control that has behavior that we want. And since pop-up box is something a little nicer to work with, that may be a cleaner solution.
Where was pop-up box?
So pop-up box is over here. So ignore the way this button looks, but it basically, pop-up box is a very simplistic control. That's a combination toggle button and pop-up. And we could even abandon the pop-up box itself and just roll our own pop-up control and build kind of a custom control out for this. Maybe that's not a bad idea. A custom control for picking the games.
Yeah, you could have a new component for your material design
toolkit.
I don't know that it would actually fit. How closely do you adhere to the... Because there's like a spec for material design, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's...
As close as possible. I will show you one other... Actually, I probably have it. That's not the right folder. Hang on. There is a... Because the material design, they threw that curveball at us with the material design 3. We do have material design 3 variants as well that are available to us. They're just in a separate demo app. So you'll note remarkably similar, but there's not there in terms of, yeah, go away. There's not a lot. There's not a lot of controls that changed for the material design 3 stuff. I mean, obviously you commented on the field stuff. We left the underscore one in. Like we didn't remove it. We left it there and we just implemented the new stuff on top of it. Oh, I wonder why toggles is empty. Interesting. I'll have to look at this. And this is still showing some of the old material design 2 things because versioning them became a little bit of a nightmare because everything's still in one package. And so all you have to do to get the material design 3 stuff is add a single reference to Material Design 3, and you're off to the races. But I don't
Gotcha.
I don't think there's anything in here that necessarily helps that much. Like, these things are different between them, right? And there's that fun
Nice animation.
little thing. Yeah. Like, WPF is not bad to do animation type stuff with. It's kind of convenient. And for example, we've got custom size for our checkboxes. Something not trivial to do, might I add. Surprisingly. What's the third one disabled? Yep. But I am wondering if it would make more sense to build a kind of a picker for that.
Could have a whole NuGet package dedicated to the single control.
Don't joke. People have built derivative packages off of my material design library to basically add in controls, because there's a long list of controls that people want, and there's a high bar for putting them into the library. Because I need them to work in all cases, not just in one particular use case. So if you do a custom control that's just for one thing in your app, you can make assumptions. But if it goes into the library, I kind of need it to work in a lot of different cases. I need to be retemplatable and play nice and all of those things. It can't just have one template. So that may be something worth chasing. I'm going to put this on a branch because we are closing in on midnight and I don't want to keep you up too late.
Yeah, it seems like that component might be
games
relatively non-trivial. I don't know.
Working on PS4. Adding games. Oh, I want to go turn off the topmost thing. You're on top of everything. Stop it. Go away. Knock it off. Because it would be a nice thing to go and add in, and I do agree it would probably make for a good example of building out a custom control. I've done streams in the past of building custom controls, and they can get.
What did you? What kind of controls did you build?
So the stereotypical example is building out
a date picker.
No, date pick. Oh my word! Don't scare me. Date pickers are here. Let me. You do not understand the pain and suffering. The people who build date pickers are a special type of crazy.
I feel like every date picker I've ever used works quite different from each other.
Hey,
because
Nexus.
it's just such a complex.
Yeah, well, and it gets worse. Like the date picker control itself is a control that's built into WPF. So remember that the control defines its behavior, not necessarily its look. So we've put a different template on top of it to give it a very material designy look, which is great. And there's a lot of components that go into this whole thing, especially when you start saying, oh, well, let's just back out to the year and let's do a year picker, and then we want to do blackout dates, and then we want to be able to go in and pick a date. Like, there's a lot that goes into that. And then, heaven forbid, people throw in right to left languages, and your world falls apart. And then they decide that right to left languages aren't confusing enough. Let's throw out the Gregorian calendar. Let's bring in the Persian calendar. Oh boy, let me tell you, things get crazy.
Got to crack open another Mountain Dew for that.
Real crazy. Yeah. So the moment you say it needs to work in all cases, thankfully, WPF just doesn't support the Persian calendar, which is arguably a bug in WPF, but I think it's more of an artifact of its age rather than anything else. But there's a number of bugs that I know people have flagged my date picker for on the Persian calendar, and I'm going, I don't control the control. Like, I would have to roll my own custom control that handles the Persian calendar, that does all of the same stuff that their date picker does. Like, here, this is panic mode. If you want to, how deep does the rabbit trail go? Date picker. Presentation framework. Yeah, this is what you would end up rebuilding, and there are a handful of things in here. So not terrible. There's some dependency properties, blah, 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 blah. Where's the scary stuff? Selected date changed. This is where somewhere in here, this thing jumps off the deep end where it goes into culture info and figuring out all of the appropriate date stuff. And it may be nested down several levels deep. And my head started spinning.
Large class.
Oh, this is small for some of those. But this is everything that's needed for the date picker. And you'll note everything in here is agnostic of what the XAML view is. Like you can take the entire template, and if you decide, you know what? I don't like this header. This header's dumb. Okay? Copy the existing template, literally just delete the header out of the XAML. You're off to the races and you work well. Unless the control defines that there's a particular thing in the UI that's critical for it to have, everything's optional. And so you can take things out of the control. And even if the control says, I really want you to have this element, you can say, okay, I add the element and I make it invisible. Problem solved.
Can you, does it support ranges?
This one doesn't. That is actually one of the things that people have asked for on here, is being able to go through and pick out a range. There are a handful of people that have built date range pickers, and it's oftentimes a composite control of multiple date pickers, so like a start and an end. Because oftentimes when people want a range picker, they really want that like hotels.com experience, right? Where it shows like the month before, the month after, and you kind of want to build out something that looks kind of like a date picker-ish, but you want to have a start date and an end date, and it's not terrible to build. We built it on one of our apps, but it is kind of a pain.
Yeah.
So, and it's one of those, I've contemplated building a control like that out for people, but I still struggle on where is the appropriate level to build, because every time I've built one of those things, how the control works has been specific to the app that I've been building.
Right.
And so that's where it's like, maybe other people would find usage in this, but maybe not. I don't know. I go back and forth. So cool.
Well, this has been a fun intro for me into WPF.
And hopefully the first of many. You get to do more .NET stuff. And thank you for coming on. It's always better to have somebody to chat with and work with rather than me just going and doing this, because I will talk for 3 hours on my own.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, especially last minute. It's I probably slowed you down quite a bit, but it's been fun being able to ask questions and stuff.
No, I think that's good. Like oftentimes I worry I go too fast for people, and it's like, fire hose, nothing gets retained. And so having somebody who's asking those questions is good for me. I need it.
Right on.
Cool. Well, oh, not that button. I can't. I need to press the right button. So let's go that button. There we go. Okay. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, everyone, for coming and hanging out. It's been a good time. If anybody's interested in checking out the repository, feel free. I'm happy to take pull requests, issues. Again, one of the objectives of this project is hopefully to be a learning area. So maybe a custom control for doing this picker would be helpful for people to see how you might build out a custom control and embed it inside of your app. So if that's something you're interested in, leave me a comment on the video, leave an issue on the repo. And as always, happy coding. I'll see everyone next time.